Good afternoon.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
I would like to call this meeting to order of the City of Laredo Historic District Landmark Board. We are meeting at City Council chambers, and I'd like to call the roll of members. Rebecca Sepulveda present. Robert David Gonzalez. Cristina Davila Villarreal. She is out of town. She's advised that she's out of town. Wayne Nance.
Here.
Stanley Green.
Here.
Priscilla Iglesias. Maria Elena Morales.
Present.
Justin Allen Hunsnercher. Mark Gonzalez.
Present.
Thank you very much. We have a quorum. I would like to,
Would you like to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
yes.
I pledge
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Would anyone like to sing? No, I'm kidding. Okay. Item 3 on our agenda is approval of minutes for the regular meeting of July 8th, 2021, and it's in our packet. I'd like to entertain approval.
I move to approve.
There's a motion
Second.
and a second to approve the minutes. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The minutes of July 8th, 2021 meeting have been approved. Next item is citizen comments.
We have no one signed up.
Thank you very much. I believe the guest present will speak at their item, is that correct? Item 5, public hearing and consideration of the following. Public hearing and consideration of a motion to write a letter in support of the nomination of lots 1, 2, 3, 10, 11, 12 of Block 857 Western Division located at 3301 San Bernardo Avenue, property known as Pan American Court and Cafe. And I believe the nomination is for recognition on the National Register of Historic Places. Is that correct?
Yes.
So that wording was left out of the agenda, but I believe we have sufficient information to proceed. Will staff make a presentation or?
Yes, we're having some technical difficulties with the pin drive, so I'm getting them to email it to PAC. I was just making sure the phone call is going through.
Okay. Would you like to?
Could we have the Laredo Cultural District speak a little bit on behalf of their new group?
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Talisa Lucanati Molano. I'm here with Sandra Rocha Taylor on behalf of the Laredo Cultural District. And I just wanted to kind of update you guys while we're waiting here on the Cultural District. In 2018, several of us got together and entertained the idea of presenting Laredo as a cultural district to the Texas Commission of the Arts. What that would do is put us at the state level, and it's an application process, and if granted the official designation, we would join, at this time, 48 other cultural districts across the state of Texas. This would open up grant opportunities to our nonprofits, our historical buildings and properties, and other things to allow them access to more money. So around that time, we gathered a lot of our nonprofits and active members of our community, and we created a steering committee. And along with the CVB, the planning department, and just a lot of the other nonprofit organizations, we got together and started formalizing the process. So what happened in 2020 was our first application, which is this one, which is about 90 pages. It includes all of our historical assets, so our Laredo Main Street, our Webb County Heritage. It includes our restaurants, our events, attractions, the WBCA, all the events that happened. And we also had to work in regards to planning into what were the actual boundaries of this cultural district. So being as inclusive as we were, we actually have 3 distinct areas that comprise the whole district. And that is the 95 or so blocks of downtown known as El Centro. It also includes going up San Bernardo, Avenida San Bernardo, up to Pace Street, and then it also goes down Washington over to Fort McIntosh. And so when we looked at that, we thought we really had a broad overview of everything that we have to offer for regional tourism and community here in Laredo. And so that's what we presented to the Texas Commission of the Arts. Last year, I think there were 9 cities that, 9 or 10 cities that submitted. We were first loser at number 5, so we were not awarded. But we submitted again this year with, I'm not sure of the actual number that submitted, but we will find out September 9th if we are granted that district. So that's what we're patiently waiting for.
In addition to that, Talisa is our president, our board president, and I'm the vice president, but working with Webb County, they provided a lease for us at Casa Ortiz. So we have worked with the other organizations that used to do Caminarte, and we've revived that again. It's now called Noche de Arte, so we can expand it to our different districts. And we had a wonderful turnout. People were very excited that Casa Ortiz is open to the public, and people can come in and see that beautiful historic building. And I'll use that as a segue for the Pan American. Several years ago, working with Jesus Najar, who used to live in Laredo and is now working in Virginia with a university to restore their historic buildings. He's a historic architect. He had always wanted to work with me on the project to nominate the Pan American. And it is a historic property, but it's very personal to me because when my father was 13 years old, he lived where the highway now sits behind the property. And I'm going to do this, I'm sorry, because I can't talk. And he was hired by the Pan American. That was his first job, and he stayed there throughout his life. And as he moved up, they hired my mother as a waitress in the little coffee shop, and that's where they met. And then they got married, and he went off to the Air Force. He had 4 children. Within that time, they made my mother manager of the coffee shop. He came back, he became manager of the hotel. The third owner eventually sold to both my parents. And my sisters, 4 of us, lived in the motel. We never had a home. I hated it at the time, living in a little room. And we had no kitchen, so our kitchen was the restaurant. And people think, oh, that's amazing. But we had to get dressed, shower, get dressed, and go downstairs and sit. And all that was great until we got 9 or 10, which for my dad was working age. And anytime the immigration would come and unfortunately take some of our staff, we had to fill in. So we were washing dishes, cleaning rooms, waiting on tables. It was quite an adventure and quite a way to learn good working skills that have served me well throughout my life. But the Pan American wasn't only a motel and a coffee shop. It was kind of a little social gathering area. And my father became a notary public, and he used to help a lot of people with translating. You know, people in Laredo mainly speak Spanish, and they would get documents regarding Social Security or Medicare or things like that, and they couldn't translate it. So my father would help them. And many times, you know, he wouldn't accept payment. And so people would come and offer their services. Anyway, unfortunately, my mother passed away when she was just 64 years old. And then 6 years later, my father passed away as well. And my sisters had all left Laredo. I stayed, and I was able to purchase the property, and I bought them out as well. So, you've seen me, trying to repair the property, and unfortunately, I didn't know this until after my father died. He did have funds. He was doing well at the hotel, but when the peso devaluated, he lost everything he had because unfortunately he had invested in the banks in Mexico. So we started with considerable debt, but since I had worked at IBC, they were able to refinance the debt in my name. And we're almost paying it off, but little by little, we've been repairing what we can, and we've converted part of it into the food truck park that some of you have been to, and we have live music, and I decided to turn it into something fun for the community, and that's where we have a lot of, we've opened up 2 art galleries, and we're in the process of opening up 2 more. And so I hear stories from a lot of people that come by and say that that's where they've had their first job, that's where they met their wife, they had their wedding reception there, and I was blessed to have inherited a lot of historic pictures, and I don't know if that's part of the presentation, some of the pictures are in there. And some of the pictures that you'll see of the grounds are my uncle and my aunt, my mother, because it became a family affair for all of us. And now it continues. This is my son sitting there and my husband. And so we all are embracing the Pan American. He will be going to culinary school, God willing, soon. And my daughter is in her 3rd year of law school. And so who doesn't want an attorney in their family to help with anything we may need in the future? So I hope you support our efforts to designate our property as something historical for the community. And I think if we do this, I used to serve on the board just as you have. You know how the community sometimes does not support historic preservation. There are some people here that think, well, we should just tear down these buildings and build something new and great and wonderful. Well, you lose your personality. When you do that, then you're just, what are you? And Laredo is so unique with the buildings that we have here. I mean, some of these buildings that are crumbling, made out of sandstone in the Azteca area, you don't find them anywhere else. So thank you for listening to the presentation, and I'll step away so that.
I'm just hoping you kept the menudo recipe.
Yes,
okay.
we did, because yes, my father was famous for his menudo recipe, and my nephew used to work in the kitchen with him. So yes, we have that. And eventually, my son, hopefully, will reopen the restaurant and do some of our traditional recipes in there. And our sign. I know people complain about the sign. Why haven't you fixed it? Well, Sal's Pizza across the street from us, at one time someone rented it, and the Best Western historic sign was there. And the gentleman that was remodeling the restaurant decided to remove the sign to fix it and put it back up, put neon on it. The city wouldn't allow him to put it back because it didn't comply with the ordinance. This was 10, 15 years ago. So I've always been worried. And I'll call the city, they'll say, yeah, take it down, we'll let you put it up. No. So I know I need to get, permission to be able to do that. And fundings. So, excuse me, hopefully with this will open doors for some of that. So let me step away.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Yes, I included some of the photos that you provided from your application in the PowerPoint, but the board has the entire application in their packet, so it has all the different photos.
Oh, one more
That's
thing.
very lengthy.
If I may add, and you'll see that in the application, he may mention it as well. One of the really neat things that I discovered in doing this was that the first Hispanic registered architect in the state of Texas, Pablo Sainz, who's the mother of Mrs. Bravo from Bravo Insurance, was the architect for the Pan American, along with several other buildings in Laredo. But I thought that was really wonderful to learn. And yeah, you can see how we need to still do a lot of touch-ups on it, but we're getting there. Thank you.
Just your name for the record.
Yes, Jason, and also for the planning department, for the record. I'm just trying to get some. Richard, can I get access to this one? Or we can just scroll through the images. I have no control on this side. You can just run through them. So we grabbed a couple of photos out of the application, that way y'all can get a view of what was submitted from its early days. Well, right now it's the current views, the aerial view. And then you can just scroll past them, and we'll go into some of the historic photos that they shared. Aerial view showing along Avenida San Bernardo. You can see a few other landmarks around Martin, the fire station, Martin High School itself, LJ Christian. Wondering if I should go up by the board. You can run through them, Richard, a little. There's a 3D view, street view from Google Maps. And this is what they sent out to the mayor. Texas Historical Commission sent him a letter and to mention that there was a property being nominated in Laredo and asking for a letter of support from the mayor and from the historic board as well. These are a couple of the same thing y'all have in that packet, a couple of the description they submitted for this application. Goes through all the lengthy details of, what was described, geographical areas, and then gets into the narrative, as you lovely shared. From 1946, continuing on. Shares, as you all know, San Bernardo was a corridor for the pre-I-35, so serving the hotel industry as those travelers came through Laredo. This is definitely a place that they'd stop by, both going and coming from Mexico. One of the early photos. This is the one talking about having air conditioner. And so a staff recommendation, we asked, staff supports the recommendation for a letter of support to the Historic District Landmark Board, from the Historic District Landmark Board to the Texas Historical Commission. And a proposed motion from you all.
I have a question for staff. So essentially, they're asking to become a historic district for another, basically like the other overlays?
No, it's just for a landmark. So they were nominated to, Texas Historical Commission is asking them to get nominated into the National Register.
Okay, like whenever we're driving all across the state where you see a monument that's sometimes set up, it's recognized as a monument.
Correct. And as the map we show will have different, if you're outside of the boundaries of the historic district, it'll get a landmark. And so that way you're not within there. The other district that they're mentioning prior to this was the cultural district, and that's a new group that they're establishing.
Yes.
And it encompasses those boundaries.
But we're not voting on that right
No,
here.
correct.
It's just a
We're
letter
just
of
asking that they
recommendation.
share. As we all know, there's various entities in historic, and we just talked about one of the items, how do we coalesce these various groups into supporting one another? And so this served as a good opportunity for them to speak on their landmark, which y'all are going to vote on, and then they shed a little light on the cultural district.
I just can't see how there's any negative impact of not recommending this, and like you said, all it does is open the door for potential funding, for improvements and stuff like this. I don't see how
And
this
we
could
actually,
negatively impact any citizen of this city.
absolutely,
Okay.
we were notified by the state about this, so we did call them to double check, what do we need to do as far as a city?
Yes.
And, basically, they did their homework, they did everything, and so we're here to support them, and we thought we'd put it on the agenda to get the support of the board.
I'd like to ask a question. Is the Pan American locally designated?
No,
Does it have
no,
a
it's not
city of
locally
Laredo?
designated, and it doesn't have to to submit an application.
Correct.
And they're very thorough, so they go back and, one of the things that they liked was that it's one of the original courts, and I really haven't changed much on the facade of the property. I've tried to maintain it, as it was originally. I've actually tried to recreate some of the windows, and I've had a hard time trying to do that. No, it's not locally designated.
Okay. And then with this designation, it does qualify then for some tax credits. I don't know if you've looked into that.
Yes, there is that allows those kind of things, so, yeah.
Great.
I don't know the detail yet, but I will be investigating that. Thank you.
All right. So are there any more questions from the board? I'd like to entertain a motion. You have a draft of the letter prepared by Jason Hinojosa for our, to submit our approval. Do you agree with the content, and would you like to proceed with?
Can we, I'm having a hard time hearing. Do you think, would it be dangerous for us to take off our, at this
You
point?
get you.
I don't know.
We could only encourage you to wear your mask, but it's your choice.
Okay. Well, I mean, actually, mine doesn't bother me, yours.
Mine bothers
It's the
me.
hearing.
Okay,
But I don't,
we'll
I mean, if
take
we
mine
have,
down when I'm speaking.
Madam Chair, if you don't mind, if you could close public hearing,
All right, yes.
and then we can go to discussion and motion.
I'd like to hear a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
There's a motion and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, I'd like to then entertain a motion to approve our letter of support for the nomination.
Would you like for me to display it on the Elmo, just so
Please.
I think we all have a copy, right?
I think there was only, but if y'all have seen it, it's just, we reflected it off of what the state shared with us and
Right.
replaced it with Laredo's information.
I so move.
There's a motion.
I'll second.
Second, I think it's unanimous already. All in favor? Aye.
Just as a comment, I do consider it a historical place, and you talked about that when I married my husband, who is from here, from San Antonio, came in 1977, when I got engaged, and I did go to the Pan American because it was the place to go to in 1977.
That is awesome.
Thank you for sharing that.
I don't know how old you were, or even if you were born, but it was 1977. So
He wasn't born yet.
Roll with it.
So I'd like to congratulate the family, that you want to keep it, and it is. And my dad, by the way, always called all the way from San Antonio to Laredo the Pan American Highway. So it is known as that. It was known as that before it was 35.
Yes,
1936.
Yep.
thank you.
Thank you and good luck, and we wish you all the best.
And many more.
Much success.
Let me see what we have. You can switch back to the PowerPoint, Richard.
Yes.
Thank you. Item 6. May we continue? Discussion with possible action on the following. A coalition of historical organizations in Webb County, Laredo. Presentation by Texas Historical Commission on the roles and responsibilities of historic landmark board members, and introduction to the certified local government program.
This was, to tie that in, it was the Texas Historical Commission's Preservation Network. I attended one of their meetings recently, and we were talking about the certified local governments, and it was more just kind of brainstorming on what are we doing locally and how can we learn from one another. And so everybody kind of pointed at San Antonio and said, tell me what y'all are doing. And what they shared was, we really don't do anything, but we have a staff of 20. And with that, they said, what we do is we lean on all of our stakeholders in the community, people that are already out there doing these types of things, the advocacy, the outreach, the communicating to their various districts. And so they said, what we do here is we try to bring that all together and have the form of a couple of events, and then also for the community to know that they can always come in and ask about what do they do to their property. And so when they shared that, it was kind of a conversation Orly and I had, and with some of the other group, saying, how do we coalesce all these different groups that are interested in history? As we all know, the public doesn't really look into who's hosting the event. They just wanted to know that their history is being highlighted, right? And whether it's Webb County or the state of Texas or the board, they're not really keen on attending an event just because who's throwing the party. It's to attend and highlight that history. And so in my conversation with Ms. Taylor with the application, I said, it would be a great opportunity you guys shed light on this cultural district, because it's another one that's happening, and their focus is more on arts and music and entertainment. And so I said, okay, we've got various entities. How could we bring back to life that document, as you mentioned, the preservation plan, showing roles and maybe just loosely tied ways that we're all working together, right? Is it that the Webb County Heritage Foundation is going to be our source for historic artifacts, the cultural district for foods and events, and just promoting one another's activities. So I just wanted to bring that conversation back up because as downtown continues to get more and more attention, I think it'd be great as a community if we had a unified voice for history. And so that's kind of where all this led up to. And I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but I just wanted to bring it back up for conversation and see what y'all's thoughts were. Not that we had to move on any item specifically or a decision, just kind of if y'all see that there's an opportunity to move forward with that, or hey, we try this, maybe not so.
What we're trying to do in the department is to reach out to all these organizations and try to get them to come to the planning department as a hub, so we can get their contact information. We can invite them to these meetings. But we can communicate with each other. We're trying to find out everybody's agenda. What are they working on, so that we know in our office, so that if we ever get to a point where there's some funding for something, at least we'll know agendas and say, hey, well, we have that in Laredo. We do this. So this is a great way to bring that together, because what I was saying earlier, Mr. Gonzalez, I don't want this historic board to just be a one day a month discussion. So I've invited our Madam Chair to come to the office to discuss other issues beyond what's here, so that our staff can work to help kind of advance a little on some ideas. And one of them is to bring these groups in, because we have a lot of good people that are trying to do good stuff for Laredo, but everybody seems to be doing their own battles, and they're the boards are getting smaller. It's the same volunteers. They're getting tired. And if they get tired and they don't do it, then what's going to happen? Who's going to be the watchdog on this? So we're trying through our office. We have a room for meetings. We have all the equipment that's necessary. We have staff to help out. So we're hoping we can kind of tie this all in, so it could make it a little bit easier to protect our historical, edge here that we have in Laredo. So that's kind of the steps we're taking. So it's up for discussion, but that's the movement that we're trying to create.
I think some of the public hearings that have been held for different plans, downtown plan, this plan, that plan, has attracted a lot of input from all these different group members. But there hasn't been like a common project or goal or something like that. So maybe if we look at what needs to get done, and then we try to form some kind of a common action plan. And I had mentioned to Jason, and I encourage you to make a copy of this for everyone on the board. It's old. This is a very old document called the City of Laredo Historic Preservation Plan, and it was produced in 1996, and I believe Dr. Green was on the landmark board at the time and helped to form this, and it was done by city staff. Well, it's a lengthy study of our historic districts. It's a good read for everyone. And then in the back of it are a lot of resources, because the goal was to try to create more local designations. For example, Pan American Courts has had no protection for any changes that happen to it, even though it is a historic building, because it's not in one of our historic districts. There's several buildings in our downtown area that have been demolished because they were not in the specific historic district, and this board had no control whether it got demolished or not. And so that's where you can reach out and designate that building and this building, things that are significant. Canseco House, San Agustin High School, I think, is in it. But, buildings like that are historically significant to our community, to our neighborhoods, and those need to be protected by our ordinance. And so things like that, there are plans to do that, and things that were not accomplished. I was telling Stan earlier that some of the buildings that were listed as potential local landmarks are gone now. Rooney Elementary, Dikey's Elementary, significant buildings in our neighborhoods are gone because they had no protection. So how can we review this plan of action? I'd like to have that workshop that we had talked about go through this, but if you could maybe make a copy of this available to everyone.
It's on our planning department website. Under other plans, we have a list of all the, I sent those out in a link as well, but we do have them on our planning department website.
Is it complete? Because I didn't see all of the,
I think you mentioned that when we went through it, that it wasn't, it didn't have some of the items. So if all I have is that digital record, I could make a copy of this
I can
original one.
share this and
Yes.
maybe you can scan it,
I would love
whatever's
to.
missing.
Yes, of course.
Okay,
But I do agree, maybe also serving, for the next meeting or another one, showing which properties from this plan, from that previous plan have gotten demolished and use that as a sounding board, because these actions weren't taken, then, we've lost these buildings and moving forward, we can lose more, if we don't choose to work together and preserve some of these places.
the action plan actually had things that each of these boards and organizations that Mr. Navarro mentioned can do. Perhaps it's in their mission, but not in ours, etc. And so that's how we can work together towards a common goal.
I was figuring maybe overlapping of the boundaries of responsibility and then finding maybe some working goals around those areas that everybody has interest in and the common theme, like you mentioned, and their mission statement. So we find that uniform path that we at least will walk together for a while, because everybody will branch off into their own.
Right.
But I think, again, highlighting the history is the ultimate goal. And so I could piece that together. Obviously, Mr. Navarro is very supportive of working on this, and we talked about setting up an interactive web map with all the data that we have. So that way, once you go to right now, our history tab or historic tab on our planning website's a little lacking of resources, and so we've talked about populating it with additional stuff that we have in-house, and then maybe that could serve as a conversation on that. Do we want to extend on that, or how do we want to work together moving forward? So that's something.
I'm showing 122 pages on the site, but I don't know if that's.
Okay, I guess I just saw the one that you shared at our meeting, and I didn't go through the one on the website. But this one has appendixes, and it might be the same
I'll still
one.
scan it.
It's
Start
possible.
counting.
I'll still scan it that way in case there is anything missing.
Right.
We have that, at least original document. Thank you, Mr. Green.
And then each of us should get a copy, or I don't know if you think it's sufficient to look at it online.
Both.
Some of us still need paper. I
That's
don't know
okay.
how you feel about that, or maybe you can make your desire known to Jason, and if you want paper, he can provide it.
I'm fine with the scan. I printed out Recode recently.
Oh.
The first draft. And
What
then I found
fun.
out the second draft is
Second draft is in there, so go ahead.
the day after I printed it out. I'll stick with the scan for now. No, thank you.
Mr. Green? You have any comment, being that you previously wrote this or took part in it?
I was just trying to think if I'm kind of a pack rat. And I was
Probably have it somewhere.
so I'm just trying to, as you were talking, I was just wondering if I have it still. And possibility in Nina, of course, I don't know if she's still working in San Antonio or if anybody's in touch
I
with
don't
her.
think so.
But we could probably,
Find her, yeah.
and it wouldn't surprise me if she has a copy. And but at any rate, I'll do my best to try to find a copy.
Well, we have one here. He can scan mine.
Okay.
Good.
And just the last thing I wanted to add on that, I personally have a passion for history and, did that in my previous work in San Antonio. And come to find out, I worked a lot on the tricentennial project for San Antonio turning 300. And so I worked with the River Authority, very instrumental in the development of San Antonio and the missions. And so during that time, we spent a lot of time in Market Square, Market Plaza. And as we were going through the old maps, the 1912 John Rolleman map shows the section of Laredito, Little Laredo. And so I, sure enough, was interested, what's this leading to and where's this going? And so Market Plaza, what everybody sees, like Mi Tierra, the restaurant, and all the little shops, is they mimic that after Laredo, what they saw here, and took it back over there. And if you follow the map on the Laredito, it's right where I-35 is at, and San Pedro Creek, and the Camino Real connects right to there. It takes you right into it. And so it's beautiful to see, you know, how well we're connected with San Antonio and throughout of Mexico being the crossing point. But I feel just being here locally, I had to move away to come back to appreciate my own hometown. And what better way to find it in the history of San Antonio, learning about Laredo. And so that was a mission coming back home, was make sure that we do whatever we can to highlight those components, because a lot has happened on the border, right? And there's a reason to Americanize the border as the transition of country happened, but then we lost a lot of our history. And so I think it's a great opportunity to bring that back and highlight it. And what better way than tying up all these organizations that already are doing it, and just kind of having that unified voice for whether it be funding or events. And so, again,
Well,
preaching to the choir, but we're here to support. And
Well,
anything.
Jason, one of the things that I think we have not taken advantage of is that there is a National Preservation Week, and it's in May. Unfortunately, Webb County Heritage Foundation is always working on the birthday of Laredo and the Founder's Day at the same time. So they don't have the resources to be doing a lot with Preservation Week. But perhaps that's something we can do as a coalition and highlight the history of our neighborhoods, put something up through social media and through public access or some other way, and have this board get more involved in that, maybe have a workshop or
I was going to allude to that. The gentleman from San Antonio, his name slips me right now, but we're in a conversation of, he shared the one thing or something they do every year is they have the historic homeowners fair. And so the community knows that that's something to go to every time, and they'll have vendors set up from all the different organizations, but it's something that they host, and they share some of this stuff that they require when you're doing these repairs to these homes and the resources available. And so I think that's a way to open up the doors to the board, right? Kind of getting the input and a couple of houses that can volunteer to show off their house. You know, I met with the bookstore yesterday, and what a beautiful, you know, revival of that property, one that was going to get torn down. And so that way the public can come in, and sometimes people have, you know, we take it for granted that we've gotten to walk through those doors, but a lot of the community hasn't. And so that's a good way to open up those doors, and they, you know, if the interest continues, they would reach out to the board and say, this is what we'd like to do, how can we get there? And being on the zoning side, right now we've gotten a lot of interest in downtown, and people wanting to do stuff with their property, and people that have, their parents live there, and they grew up there, and they've all moved away, and now they're like, I'm coming back to take care of my house. And I thought that was great, you know, but
wonderful.
there's, again, that momentum. So I would say some of those events, like you mentioned, a workshop, being out in the field and opening up those doors, that was an example they shared that I said, I think we're going to run with that. And one other thing, we just talked about putting out all the events that we have locally for the historic board, and they, across all those different cities, we're going to try to attend one of the others events while they're in town. So having the Historic Preservation Office from San Antonio come invite them down, just informal, right? They can come and enjoy some of the events in Laredo and vice versa. And so I wanted to share that link with you all as well.
That's great.
I know that we can continue on. So this was just for discussion, so you know kind of where we're at with things, and if y'all have any recommendations, we'll definitely take them forward. The third item was discussion with no action, discussion of the policy development for the historic board. We went through this presentation last time with Vanessa, and we talked about the whole process of what happened with the ordinance. And so this was just, we had talked in the previous meeting that it would be, we would like to bring this back up to see if there was changes or any edits that y'all felt were needed, but we just wanted to bring it up for discussion again.
Well, I'm wondering, since you mentioned it was on the agenda of the planning, what is it, the
Planning and
P&Z board, is that still on the agenda?
The ordinance that, no, it was not put on the P and Z agenda, no.
Okay.
No, that would be something that we would have to take to them if there was any changes or they would take the recommendation and go to council again, the same process.
Because I think you sent an email to all of us telling us that you were open to receiving our input because it was on the agenda for later this month. Is that not?
No, well, what we wanted to do was get your input, because I know that when I came on board, I was told that this board, had some comments, about the ordinance.
Yes.
And so I said, well, let's at least get their comments together so we can hear where they're coming from, because I wasn't sure where everyone was coming from. And wanted to give you some time to go over that, and then we could review and see what action needs to be taken, if any action needs to be taken. But I don't know how much time you'll need. Is this something that off the top of your head you already know what your issues are, or do you need a whole new presentation of the ordinance so that you can refresh your memory? I didn't know how to really approach it, so we wanted to put it on this agenda so that you could kind of give us some guidance of how you would like us to run with this.
Well, I think we've discussed it for 3 meetings in a row, and everyone has opinions and comments, but it hasn't been anything concrete put in writing or a vote. And so that's what we're lacking.
Okay.
Perhaps we can schedule a meeting just for that.
Okay.
So that we can all bring our specifics to that meeting and vote on them, so then you can have something concrete to take to the Planning and Zoning Commission. Do you think that's?
I would like to say yes, but since I don't know what the comments are, I don't know if they'd be significant enough to take to P and Z or to take to council. So that's why I'd like to see them first before we do. But obviously, yes, I mean, we can definitely do that, but I just don't know what the.
Madam Chairman, where I think we left off, and I'm speaking for just only myself, I remember that we had a good 20-minute conversation about the disappointments. This was right before the meeting, right before you came on board. The disappointments with the last ordinance that was passed by council, and members of this board felt that it was a little hurried through, and but it was just it ended up just being conversation here. And so where we left off, and I think that's where the workshop was set up for, that we just couldn't come together. And you're doing the right thing. Let's send the current ordinance as it stands right now out to all the board, and if you really have grievances with these sections, put pen to paper and submit them back to you guys, and then we get together on a scheduled workshop, and then talk about shovel through the real stuff and preferences and stuff that you feel that will never make it through. Like have a what's a workshop's all about.
Sure.
So you, in my opinion, you've done everything that you can. Now it's up to our end to actually send you written material. Otherwise, we're just talking. So, am I correct?
Yes.
Yes.
I think we need a deadline though, because it's,
I can
Yes.
I send out the email, but I can resend it with a deadline on there if you can get your comments back by such date. That way we
why
can.
don't we give ourselves a couple
3
of.
p.m.
Now I'm talking.
A
Yeah.
week or two, I don't know what your time schedule is like, but a week or two, and then we schedule a meeting like a week after, so you can have something you can bring us.
Combine them all.
Or
We'll
as soon
say-
as you reach out to everybody by email, I need comments by this time.
And it could be
that's
on
it.
the next agenda for the next
Review.
meeting as an action item.
Yeah, a week or 10 days would be not too long, so we don't lose our thinking about it.
Right.
So
Is that
we'll
okay?
go-
We'll work on 2 weeks, and then we'll get it out to you, but we'll be bombarding you with emails so that you can just, reminders, so that you can get it into us, and I think
Very good.
that'll work. And if we get it sooner, if everybody gets their information in sooner, then we can start working on getting that workshop going, or at least having a meeting so we could go over all the comments
Okay,
and go through them, yeah. And because my concern was, I know maybe the approach that this ordinance was brought to you all was pushed through and you really didn't get a chance to look at it. Maybe that wasn't the proper way of doing it. But that being said, I'd like to get to the meat of the ordinance and talk about that. And if there is some significant things that this board would really like to see change, that's the stuff that's what I want. That's what I need, because,
very good.
Madam Chair, I'd also like to revisit something. I want to bring it back because if we're going to have a workshop, I'd like to kill two birds with one stone. One thing that Vanessa and I believe the whole board agreed with me is that even this current ordinance did leave some unfinished business on the administrative approvals. It said, hey, we're going to allow these administrative approvals similar to administrative plat approvals,
Right.
but it did not go the extra distance to say under these conditions. And then that's where there was a little bit of disagreement among this board. And so if we're gonna talk about, what I would request from staff and from you, Jason, is go ahead and, like, we're gonna comment on the current ordinance, but make a recommendation from staff on what you would do to finish out that ordinance. It's incomplete. And it's recognizably incomplete. You know, it will allow administrative approvals under a future section. So,
It's a
I
great
mean, might as well
word.
get it out of the way. We're gonna have a workshop, get that out of the way,
Good point.
because I'm sure that, city council's not gonna wanna see something again. They just approved this in May, we're gonna come back,
Right.
and then come back again later, they're gonna start ignoring us.
Right.
So, with that said.
No, I completely agree.
Good.
Madam Chair, excuse
Yes.
me, I do need to.
Yes.
The excuse, yes, of course.
And with that, that
Thank
was
you.
the end of it
So
as
there
well.
goes the
Okay,
quorum.
that's, quorum.
I do want to say that recently we've had a conversation about, there's a new ordinance in the works for vacant buildings. And I
Yes.
wonder if on the next agenda, you can bring us an update on that proposal, because it is going to impact historic buildings.
We will, it's actually going to council this coming Monday.
Oh,
Yes, and basically what was happening was we have a lot of vacant buildings downtown that are deteriorating. They're substandard. They're not, you know, they want to get them up to a certain level of standard, but, the owners are not around. They don't live in town in some cases. So what we're asking is the owners of these properties to register with the city. And that way we can have a listing of all these people that own these vacant buildings downtown. And then, there are some fines that they're putting, after 1 year, and then after, I think it's after 6 months, there's penalties for not being registered with the city. So that's being presented at council. But the gist of it is to try to get the owner to do something with their property. Now, that being said, that's very difficult because we know that there's no foot traffic downtown, there's no car traffic downtown, you know, the bridges are closed. So there's a lot of things that are impacting the downtown area. What we've done through the planning department is I'm starting to visit and speak to the realtors in town. I also spoke at Rotary, and what we're trying to do is to encourage the realtors and stuff to see the opportunities that exist downtown in hopes that they could come through and maybe bring investors to the downtown area. Apart from that, I'm reaching out to some owners to see if we could get some of these buildings opened so that we can have a so-called open house to some of these buildings so that we can get the realtors to come down and walk these properties to see the potential, of course, in a safe manner, you know, not just open the door and let them, you know, walk into these, but, so that we can get them to see the buildings and hopefully they can bring investors downtown. So we're doing that. It's a kind of a grassroots approach, but, if we just sit around, I mean, it's not, we have to get out there. We're trying to bring them to the downtown area. So that's what we're doing on our part to get out. And Jason's been joining me on these adventures so that, he could speak from his perspective, being that he's an owner of a home in the St. Peter's district. But, that's what the steps we're taking in order to help kind of revitalize the downtown area. But by showing the opportunities, you know, I don't want to call them vacant old buildings. I want to call them opportunities, you know, because there are investors out there that really like these. And yesterday we had an owner that has a building. They haven't been inside it in years. It's locked up. The bars are on it and everything. And I asked if they would lend me the keys so we can go and kind of see what it looks like and see what we could do to that building. And they were happy to. They said yes, we'd love to, and they were going to reach out to their neighbors since they're all friends And we're gonna try to have a meeting at our office to discuss what can we do with your properties, because all these properties are empty. And all the owners are just, they're saying, whatever, I mean, we don't know what to do with our property. Can you help us? So we're gonna try to help them and see if we can't spark some interest in the downtown area. And if we can create some residential, maybe some lofts or some apartments or something that's a little bit nicer, that's what we're trying to shoot for. Well, that's where we are with that. But we can definitely come back to your comments, bring that ordinance here so that we can go over it with you.
Since it's going to be approved already, maybe you could send us a copy of the
Absolutely.
draft.
We'll do that today.
Just an observation, and I'm sure, your husband, because his office is right there at St. Peter's. But some of these places are occupied, and they still, I don't know what we can do about keeping them clean. I mean, literally, they're like, the grass is like trees, and they just have a lot of debris. And I don't know if code enforcement ever goes by St. Peter's, area, but it seems like they don't. I mean, I've taken pictures and sent them to them, and it's like bad,
I think I'm familiar with
like,
some
and
of
they're
the-
occupied. I mean, people live there, and just there'll be a very nice home that somebody redid, and then you'll have two homes that are like, they're abandoned, but they're not abandoned. People live there. And I'm like, I know in Plantation, they send you a note right away if grass is drying up, or if you don't have enough trees, and if you don't have enough brushes, and you're like, what happens at St. Peter's? Because it's such a nice neighborhood, but it's like, I don't know who to call or who to insist that they go and they look at that area, because people who actually live there just.
I'll take your comments and I'll report it to the building department, and just your observations of what you've seen, and see if we can't.
Yeah,
Put a
Casa
little bit
Deutsch
more.
was remodeled, by Santana. And then across the street is that building has literally been like that. I bought my office 26 years ago, and it was already that way. Like, they had a fire, and it's off the tax rolls. Nobody's paying taxes on that property.
Right.
Because they left it as, we're rebuilding it, like we're redoing it, but nobody's ever redone it, and nobody's ever gone back to visit. If you look at the tax rolls, that property doesn't exist. It's not paying taxes, it's not on the tax roll, and they've never fixed it.
So no
And it's right
reason.
across Santana's home, and he did such a good job, he's been doing such a good job in making it look beautiful. But he gets a little depressed by the
No,
neighbors.
If you're looking at that often from the beautiful balcony, it's.
Madam
Yes.
Chair, not to stop the conversation, but if we could, we lost quorum,
Yes.
so if we could just adjourn, because basically the meeting's
Okay.
Done.
over, and then we can continue any discussion you want, but I'd like to just
Sure.
close it out.
All right.
Okay, lack of quorum.
So would you have additional comments? Because I think that's the next item, and we did not hear your,
No, ma'am,
No.
no, we're good.
okay. So I'd like to entertain a motion to, we can't even vote. So the meeting's
Yeah.
over,
So
and
meeting's
meeting's
over,
adjourned
yes. Once you walk
without
out.
a quorum.
you're-
Exactly.